Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 19 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the MP for Calgary Centre, Greg Mclean. Greg was first elected in the 2019 election and was re-elected in the 2021 election. Before being elected, Greg worked as a financial professional for 20 years. Greg has a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Alberta and an MBA from the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario. Greg currently serves as the Conservative Shadow Minister for Natural Resources. Thank you, Greg, for joining me today.
Vincenzo, thanks very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here today, and we're going to start off with our first segment, which is called Greg's Story, where we will talk about your political history. So the first question is, when did you first get involved in politics?
Great question. And a lot of people ask it on the street. And when I went to university, there was a premier in Alberta called Peter Lougheed. And if you think about a great premier, he was a man to follow. But I started in the path when I was at university. I had a good friend named Don Miller. And just you think about the coincidences in life. Don became a famous student leader. And Don and I worked together at an Eaton store in downtown Edmonton while I went to University of Alberta. And Don got me involved because Don was running in Students' Union at University of Alberta. And he asked for somebody with some finance background. And he knew me and he knew that I had a whole bunch of friends at university. And he said, would you like to come serve as my candidate for vice president finance and running for Students' Union? And at that point in time, University of Alberta had a deficit in their Students' Union of about $750,000. And I had to come in there and solve that. I solved it in 1 year. And of course, it's budgeting, right? You look at where you can actually raise some more funds and where you can actually cut some expenses. And that's what we did. We got out of debt in 1 year. And it was a big accomplishment at the time, and everybody was very happy about it. But from there, I joined a political party because I looked at who was on the horizon here. And Peter Lougheed, in my opinion, was a leader that Canada hasn't seen since. And, he's a man that inspired, I think, a lot of Albertans. I think if he'd been a national politician, a lot of Canadians would have followed him a lot more closely than they did. But he had a lot of great leadership abilities, and it was a joy to work with him. And as a result, I joined the Progressive Conservative Party and became the vice president of finance there, and eventually the president of the Progressive Conservative Youth Association in Alberta.
Well, it's amazing to see the journey that brought you there, and we'll talk a little bit more about politicians, about sort of like politicians that inspire you in the last segment. But definitely a great story there. And just thinking about the thing, like you worked with somebody at Eaton's and you went on to do finances, and you went into politics now, and you're an MP for a few years now. So we'll continue on to that point in the second question, which is, why did you decide to run for the position you hold? So why did you decide to run for MP?
It's an interesting question, and a lot of people ask that because I had a successful financial career. People remember me in Calgary mostly from my role at a company called Cavendish Investing, where I was the chief investment officer for 5 years. We did a lot of early stage investing, a lot of what we call high alpha investing. So it was an encompassing job, and I really enjoyed it. But that job actually ended in 2009. Because you can't do that job for a long period of time without burning out. And I mean, really burning out, because you're on all the time. I'd had a couple jobs since then, but I still stay connected with my old friends at Cavendish. I was on a vacation with my wife in Peru, and I told her about this. And the first person when you get on side, when you're thinking about this type of change in life, is your spouse. And I spoke to my wife. I said, listen, in 2018, this is where I think our country is going. And in my strong opinion, it is going in exactly the wrong direction. And I think I should step forward and try to do something about it. And my wife, to my surprise, my wife says, you should. Everybody says you should. You understand this stuff. You understand the finances of the country. You understand what needs to happen in this country. And you're a reasonable person. So you should run for politics. And I was a little taken aback at how supportive she was of the concept, given how much of a change in life it was going to be. But that's when it started. And I came back and I ran for the nomination in Calgary Centre. Calgary Centre at that point in time was a liberal held riding. And so it took me 11 months. The party opened up that nomination and kept it open for 11 months before they had the final nomination. And I knocked doors, sold memberships, and became the candidate for the Conservative Party in Calgary Centre. So that's how it all transpired, and I got involved here. And since then, it's been a journey in my party to making sure we're moving forward on specific policy items that I've always supported, including balanced budgets, including the role of energy in our economy, and including the social aspects that I think we really need to ensure that our society is open to all people, and our party needs to represent that fully as well.
Well, definitely a lot of things there. I mean, especially in Alberta, we saw sort of that blue wave in 2019. There was a blue wave then that you were elected in Alberta in 2019. And also just continue on with what you were saying about the different important aspects of policy that are important to you. You as the natural resources shadow minister, obviously, there's some big conversations right now about energy and Canada's energy sources. And again, as well as an Alberta MP, you know the whole oil and gas industry. I'm sure you know it quite well by now, being an MP there for a while. So definitely some of the big conversations that are going on right now there. But we'll continue on with that. With serving as an elected official, the next segment where we talk about your experiences and achievements as an elected official. So first off, I wanted to ask, what is your favorite part about serving your community of Calgary Centre as an elected official?
There's a lot of favorite parts of it. Number one is you get to deal with people. First of all, I'm, surrounded by a good team. I've got great people in my office, and they have helped so much in making sure that my constituents get the services required. And I see that when I'm in Calgary and I have those meetings, immigration meetings, the meetings these days on passports where people are desperately seeking the assistance of government, and they've been told to go through their MP's offices. And my MP's office is swamped with those requests. I can't tell you how many dozens we get every day of immigration files, EI files, the passport files, which is recent, another falling down of government at this stage that we need to address very quickly. But my office has been handling that very well at this point. And so a good group around me here that's part of my staff, but a good group on the board that represents, Calgary Centre. I also get to work with a lot of associations. It's Calgary Centre. It's a downtown riding. It's one of the most downtown ridings in Canada. I've got a lot of high rises, but a lot of community associations, a lot of immigrant organizations that serve immigration community in Canada, a lot of business people. So you think about Calgary Centre, it is the heart of the oil and gas industry, but it's also the second largest density of business head offices in Canada. So there's a lot of that. You think about all the associations I serve and all the people that are asking me for assistance in making sure their case is heard in government and making sure that they understand better the process of representing themselves with the federal government. So that has been the big service aspect of it. And it's been a joy to actually work with all these people in that process.
Well, definitely, and serving your community as an elected official is important, and being a part of those greater talks. I mean, you serve in Ottawa, and every week you're in Ottawa or so, and you're talking in the House of Commons and rising and bringing up those national issues. But to stay connected to the community is also so important as a local MP, because you have that, and you have to stay connected to understand the needs of your riding as well. And I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite achievement as an elected official? I know it's only been it's been about 3 years or so now, but I wanted to ask you, what has been your favorite achievement as an elected official so far?
Well, there's a lot, but I say the most visible achievement that I think it's been a little overlooked, but this elective term, my party got back in power, back in Parliament as the opposition again, and a bill was brought forward on banning conversion therapy. Now, half my party had voted against that bill last time, but through some real suasion from a number of us in caucus about what the resistance to this bill was, and addressing it very clearly with our own colleagues, we moved that bill to what's called unanimous consent, where my whole party agreed that this was a bill that had to move forward. So once our party was 100% on it, the entire Parliament was 100% on it, on unanimous consent. And moving that forward on banning conversion therapy, I think was a huge step forward. I'm happy to have been part of it. And I think it's a huge success for our country, for a community that was marginalized before, which I think is less and less marginalized. And I think we need to continue to represent Canadians in that way.
Well, definitely, and I remember the conversations about that bill, especially when the election was called. There was some sort of a lot of conversations of what happens now. This bill has sort of we have to bring it up all again already, and it's great that it passed unanimously and passed all three readings and went right to royal assent pretty quickly as soon as the Parliament returned after the 2021 election.
Now, and let me dwell a little further on that, because part of the conversations on that I have with my colleagues, because remember in the previous parliament, half my colleagues had voted to not support the ban on conversion therapy. And one of the rationale for that was because they get a lot of emails. MPs got a lot of emails back. And of course, even when they voted for it, some of my colleagues said, look, I think I did the right thing. Because here the feedback I got on email on it about the concerns with the bill. And then the election happened. Okay. So those same MPs that got those, as I always tell them, don't pay attention to the 100 loudest voices, because they're just 100 loud voices. The bulk of Canadians are moving in a direction on this, and make sure you're listening to them. So the election allowed that opportunity to happen after they'd listened to those 100 loudest voices. They actually went there and knocked door to door in their ridings, and their ridings told them something very clear as, why are you guys stuck on this issue? And they came back and they supported our efforts to make sure that we pass this legislation unanimously. And I'm very pleased about that.
And it's so important, especially the election provided that opportunity for discussion. And it's important to have that discussion to see what the majority of Canadians want. And that is the job of MPs, to sort of go and talk about not only of what their constituents want, but what the majority of Canadians want, and look at that and bring that forward. So we're going to go into the last segment, which is called Politics Are All Around Us, where we talk about the world of politics around us. So the first question that I like to ask in this segment, and we already kind of touched on this, but we'll continue on, is who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
Well, I think we sort of addressed that earlier. I think Peter Lougheed is one of the reasons that a lot of us in my age group got involved in politics, in public service. And Peter Lougheed really made it about public service. Like, we were providing a service here to the public. This is not a career. Peter Lougheed used to recruit people to be in government, to be in his cabinet. Said, give me 8 years here and go back to your job as a lawyer, as an accountant, as a teacher. But I need you because I need good people around me, making sure we move this process forward. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but that's leadership. When you're pulling good people out of what they're doing now to make sure that they serve the public better. And I admire that. And I've tried to follow that throughout my whole career. It is about serving the public at the end of the day and getting better results for all Canadians.
For sure. And we're going to go into the last question, which is, what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more?
And that's an open-ended question. I really appreciate it. When I got involved, think about where I'm from the finance industry. And I look at how much our government is actually spending the next generation's money in order to stay in power. And they're buying votes day in and day out, whether you like it or not. When you're pumping money into the economy, you're creating jobs. But those jobs, which you put in, eventually you have to take out. So there's that balance there about how we make the economy run on its own without government stimulation, if you will. We have to make sure that we've got a next generation that's prepared to face the issues that they are going to have to face, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a worldwide conflict, whatever the situation may be. It might just be a domestic situation where there's, a sudden disruption in Canada's economy. We've got to make sure the country is financially prepared and socially prepared to address that situation, whatever comes out at that point in time. Make sure we have a healthcare system that sustains itself. Make sure we have an education system that can continue to sustain itself, and make sure we have a taxation base that isn't unreasonable about how Canadians can get those services without being put in the poorhouse by government sticking their hand in their pocket to grab more money. That's what has to happen here. We have to make sure we've got a solid base to build on going forward. I think so many politicians think you can just throw money at a wall and solve the problem. Throwing money at something only pushes the problem down the road. You've got to address that balance in politics and in life. And that's something I think that has not been paid attention to by politicians at all levels, federally, provincially, and municipally across Canada over the last number of decades. We have to get this back on track.
And I'm just gonna leave it at that for this interview. Is and lots of great points there as well, and lots of points for Canadians to think of, especially as in a few weeks we're gonna in a little while we're gonna see the return of Parliament in the fall. So that's all for today. Thank you, Greg, so much for joining me today. If you like today's
Vincenzo.
interview, make sure to
Thank
check.
you.
It's great to have you, and make sure to check out my other interview with Greg for Top 10 on Instagram. If you're watching this at the day of the premiere, it'll come out on Friday. To stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, BC Productions 25. Check out VincenzoCalla.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.